He teaches ethics and bias in media. How are you, Paul?
I'm good, thank you.
What are your thoughts regarding diversity in the media? Right now, you tend to see more whites and more males giving us our news.
Well, we're seeing a lot more women. I will say, when I first started out in this industry, women were having a really tough time breaking in at all. We're seeing a lot of very successful women these days. It's gotten much better. I will not say that the pay equity has happened among men and women. I will also not say that the top people in news organizations are women. There are very few women that are in power positions in the media industries. But what's really a problem is that if you turn on your TV at night and you go to a cable station, you're probably going to see somebody who's white more than you're going to see somebody who's black or Latino or Hispanic or Asian or whatever. You know, we have a lot of different types of people in America, yet the people that are putting forth the information to all the people are generally white males. I see that as a real problem. I think that the networks are owned and operated by white males. I think the power base is among the white male population. And I think that these white males, particularly those that have been in the industry for a really long time, like the status quo. These days, media has changed so much, and there's so many different kinds of media that some of the media organizations that may not be the major ones are owned and operated and produced and everything by millennials. So that's a whole different story. So what we see 10 to 15 years from now might be quite different than what we're seeing now. But you're still going to see a lot of white-haired white males on TV right now. Now, if I am a black person in America or an Asian or a Hispanic or whatever, why do I constantly have to get my information from a white male? Where are the rest of the people? So I see that as a real ethical problem. I also see the fact that sometimes when a network or even a local station hires a person of color, you'll find that they have those people covering stories that have to do with other people of color. Why aren't they just covering everything like everybody else? We hire a Hispanic woman in New Orleans for a local news station, and she's sent out to cover stories about the Hispanic population. Well, I'm a white male, and I could probably cover stories about the Hispanic population. So that's not really diversifying by hiring a person only to cover their ethnic group. It's also not diversifying to hire people who are all sort of the same ilk, certain age groups, certain look. You'll notice that you don't see very many physically unattractive people reporting the news. Well, listen, there are a lot of really bright, talented people who are not terribly physically attractive. But those stations, have to get people to stay with them, and people tend to, unfortunately, like to look at attractive people more than unattractive people. So I see that as a bias right there, and I see that as a real ethical problem. There's a lot of stereotyping that goes on in media, okay? Both in the way that things are reported, in the editorial judgment and the choice of stories that will be reported, and in the hiring. And I'm really concerned about the hiring. Almost more than anything else, I'm concerned about the hiring right now.
Well, how much does that speak to the general population? Because the media they're doing what is going to attract people to them.
Yeah, but see, attract what people? Okay, because if I'm a black person, perhaps I would feel comfortable sometimes seeing somebody who looks like me on TV. If I am a Hispanic woman, and I've gone through journalism school and perhaps gone and got an advanced degree, and then I'm being sort of shut out of certain jobs in media simply because I am a Hispanic woman. Not that the media entity would ever admit that, but it does happen quite a bit. So the audience is diverse, but the people that are putting forth the information, it is not a diverse group. It's getting a little better, but not great. On CNN, if you turn on CNN from early in the morning all the way till later at night, you don't get a black person until 9 p.m., and that's Don Lemon, okay? Why is that? Where are the black people? Where are any people of color? Where are the other cultures? Where is the reporting on those cultures? And why is it thought that a white person can sort of understand the issues of social justice that matter to these individual population groups that are not white? So I'm a little concerned. I'm more than a little concerned about that. The whole issue of social justice in this country is so huge right now. And I'm a little concerned not only about who's covering it, but I'm concerned about how it's being covered. Okay? And I haven't seen really great progress with that over the past several years.
Can you give us some examples?
A few months ago in Parkland, Florida, there was a school shooting, and several people died, okay? And this was a big story, all right? And then we had the big March for Our Lives in Washington, D.C., and similar marches all over the country, and it was heavily covered. And the whole issue of the March for Our Lives was establishing reasonable gun laws and safety precautions for the American citizenry. Well, a few days later, we didn't hear anything about it. Do you hear anything about reasonable gun laws on media now? No, you don't hear anything. It's interesting to me that these kids from Parkland spent their entire summer on a bus trip across the country getting people to register to vote so that in the midterm elections, perhaps they could make some progress and get people elected who would enact reasonable gun laws. Their bus trip was not covered at all. Not at all. So I'm saying, that's an issue of social justice, and yet the networks, after the big shooting in Florida, and after the marches were over and everybody went home, the networks went home too, and they stopped covering it. This happens over and over again. And I'll tell you why. It's because we have very short attention spans, we American media consumers. We have very short attention spans, and if the networks kept covering the same thing over and over and over, even if there was news about the issue, the people would go somewhere else and watch and listen and read something else. We started having short attention spans when the 24-hour news cycle happened, and you may remember that in the 1980s, I think around 1984, MTV started. And MTV was visually different than anything we had ever seen. Everything happened really, really fast. It was very colorful, and it was quick, okay? We were used to things lasting longer. I believe that MTV had a huge influence on media, all media, including news, and that if you look at the way things are put forth to us now, the way information comes at us, it comes really, really fast. It's quick takes, it's quick video, it's one shot here and then cut to another shot really, really quick, one person, another person, and nothing really goes in much depth, okay? So that caused, I think it sort of trained us, media consumers, to have short attention spans.
And that makes me think of a lot of the movies. They're the same way.
Yeah, movies are constant stimuli. Okay, we just demand to be stimulated all the time, and I think that has happened to the detriment of reporting current events to the public. I don't think the public's getting a fair shake, really, but it's kind of our own fault because we won't pay attention long enough to hear anything in depth. I don't know if they're still doing it, but every night on the NBC Nightly News, they had a little segment called NBC. I think they called it NBC News Indepth. It was less than 2 minutes. Well, there's no depth. You can't do depth in 2 minutes, So that's where we are. I feel that the public is ill-informed. I feel that is everybody's fault. That's the media organization's fault. That's our fault as consumers because of our attention spans and our demands to be stimulated. So I feel that everybody's at fault, but no matter who's at fault, the fact is that we are not as informed as we need to be. We don't get in deep about almost anything that matters to us.
What would your suggestions be?
Well, I've often said this, that I think that somebody ought to give it a try to go in depth a little bit more. I think that somebody should get away from the MTV style of news reporting, and I'm talking about old MTV, not current, but I think that it would be an interesting experiment for somebody to really give it a try and do more in-depth reporting on the internet, particularly where reporting happens real fast and real brief, and see if there is a segment of the population, a big segment that would sort of respond to that and really appreciate that in-depth reporting. I've worked for websites, news websites. I've worked for newspapers. I've done some stuff for radio and television, not a lot, but some. And I'm telling you that over the years, I've just watched it go down and down and down in terms of the amount of time and effort you can put into a story. Newspapers, they used to look at me and say, okay, well, we need 1,500 words on such and such topic. The same topic now, if they came at me, they would say we need 400 words. So, I'm not going to say we've been dumbed down, but we've been briefed down. Things are very brief, very fast, and we're not getting enough real information. Mm-hmm. We're at this moment now, as everybody knows, where the country is very divided on a number of issues, okay? But let's talk politics for a moment. The country is very divided politically. People are really dedicated to their political beliefs. So there's not a lot that anybody can do to change that. I mean, you can't tell people what to believe. You can just put out the information and hope that they will, as I said earlier, get their information from more than one source and sort of put it all together and use their own intelligence and decide what is real, decide what they believe. I don't know what you can do right now, because when you get a country that's this divided on issues of politics and religion and race and morality, all ethics, all of those things, it is what it is. We are where we are, and you have to, even as media, we have to meet people where they are. And therein lies the success of places like Fox News. They're meeting a huge population segment where they are. The people that like Fox News have no desire to change their views. Same thing with the people that like MSNBC. Everybody now is divided. We either have to be liberal or conservative. Well, there's a continuum. And unfortunately, what's happened with media is that they're sort of negating the continuum. And they're only catering to the extremes. And I'm really worried about that, because all that's doing is what I said earlier. They're validating beliefs that people already have, rather than trying to truly inform people with facts that they need to make up their minds about important issues.
For those of us old enough to remember Walter Cronkite, when we would turn the TV on and Walter Cronkite would say something, we believed it. We knew it to be fact because Walter Cronkite said it. I don't know if that sort of attitude has remained, but it does seem like people don't challenge the media that they hear. They believe if they're watching their particular network and someone says something, then it must be true. How do we deal with that? What's that issue about?
I have two concerns about that. The first one is that I really don't like the idea that everybody just took what Walter Cronkite said as gospel. And I have total respect for what he did in his career. I really do. But I think that the country found it really easy, the population found it really easy to just believe whatever Walter Cronkite said and go with that. That's dangerous. There should not be one human being that is the gospel of current events. There should not, okay? So people need to start thinking a little bit more. People need to exercise their individuality on this stuff. The other thing I would say about that is that we have certain people working in media now who somehow just got to certain positions in media, but they really didn't have much training and journalistic training. They really are not what we'd call reporters. They're just sort of hosts. Okay, so I will point to a couple of people that I think that's true about. I think that Sean Hannity, for example, I don't really have a lot of faith in Sean Hannity. It's not because of my politics at all. It's because of the fact that I don't think Sean Hannity is in any way a journalist, and I think that there are a lot of people that tune into Sean Hannity's program on radio and television, and they look at him the same way they look at a seasoned, trained journalist. The average consumer doesn't know that he's not a journalist, so they are assigning him a lot of credibility, and I don't know that they really should. I think he's a citizen just like you and me. I think, they could put you or me on the air, and we could do the same thing that Sean Hannity's doing, right? So I'm a little worried that there are people out there that are being trusted too much in various media outlets, and I'm certainly worried that people are a little too intellectually complacent and they would rather just tune in and have somebody sort of help them know what to believe rather than making up their own mind. Again, I do think that one solution to that is that we should go back to some more in-depth reporting and see if the audience will respond. I honestly, I'm rather optimistic about that. I think if somebody would give it a try, I think they'd find an audience.
Well, that's a fascinating idea. Paul, thanks so much for being with us today. And I think we're going to have you back talking about some other issues soon.
Thank you. I'd be happy to come back.
Thank you, Paul. Paul Greenberg, Adjunct Professor of Communication at Tulane University, on ethics and bias in the media. Please share and subscribe on iTunes or your favorite media app. This has been a Critical Topics, Critical Thinking, LLC production. All rights reserved.